Hi there, my name's Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I'm once again joined by my buddies, Cody, Mr. Brockway from Brockway's Vinyl Bites and Second Chance Records in Ontario, Canada, isn't it? Isn't it
That's
Ontario?
great. You got it.
And from immersivealbumaudio.com, once again, Jonathan Cornell joins us. Hello, Jonathan.
Hey, glad to be back.
How you guys doing today?
All good here, man.
Ready to talk about this record?
All systems
Absolutely.
go. So today we're going to talk about the new Atmos release of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the fifth Genesis record. That's right, isn't it? It's fifth.
I think it's the sixth.
The sixth Genesis record, which has come out as part of this deluxe edition box set. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about that. For this, we're going to talk primarily about the Atmos mix, as well as how it compares to the Nick Davis mix from 2007, which is a 5.1 mix. And there are some really interesting differences. I feel like some ways this is better. I feel like some ways the new one's better. And I think in many ways I'm not really satisfied with either. But we'll get to that in just a moment. First up, I just wanted to talk about this album in general, a little bit of the history. Of course, this is where Peter Gabriel starts edging out of the door. And this is where, you know, they're encamped at Headley Grange. It's the same space where people like Led Zeppelin worked. And they're hanging out with rats. Phil Collins is getting up and waking and baking. You know, it's a really unique situation, possibly haunted. Steve Hackett suggested that maybe it was haunted. But in the process, they're making this very intense music. And I feel like Peter Gabriel must have sniffed a change in the air, like, especially in kind of like the post Dark Side of the Moon world. Things are starting to get a little bit darker, a little bit edgier. Punk is starting to form just right around the corner. And one of the intentions of this album was to kind of get away from like the romantic sound of albums like Trespass or Selling England by the Pound. And one of the main influences on this album is a Chilean Mexican avant-garde acid western entitled El Topo. And here's a copy of this film. I actually love this film, although I very much hesitate to recommend it. But what Peter took from this film is this whole idea of transformation, of going underground and coming out another person. In this case, the Lamb story set in New York City, a big wall of something engulfs Manhattan. Our main character, Rail, is swept underground, where he takes this journey of self-identity. He's learning who he is in finding his brother John, who might actually be him. I think that's a pretty basic outline of the story. Of course, this is the album where Peter Gabriel is kind of writing the lyrics. Everybody else is writing the music. And for big stretches of it, I think they were more or less working as a trio, because you have Steve Hackett, who was dealing with a failing marriage at the time, so he was somewhat absent. And Peter Gabriel's dealing with the birth of his first child, and there were health complications. His wife was dealing with she was dealing with an infection and high fevers and all this stuff. And so I feel like a lot of that anxiety of parenthood sort of seeped into the story of the Lamb, which we can talk more about as we go along. But before I go any further, I thought I'd just ask you guys, what are your impressions of this album? How do you feel about it in a general sense? And I suppose, Jonathan, you can go first.
Well, I think unlike you guys, this album is relatively new to me. Like I only heard it for the first time maybe a few years ago. So I mentioned this in the review of the album I did for IAA, but I sort of discovered Genesis in the reverse way that most people do. The first Genesis album I heard was Invisible Touch, because that was the one that my dad had and liked. And, you know, I understand why a lot of people don't care for that record, but I do enjoy it. I think it's great, you know, 80s pop. maybe the sound of it isn't the most timeless of the Genesis records, but I think it's a fun album. So when I heard the stuff with Peter Gabriel on it, like years later, it was like, whoa, this is different, you know?
What year did you dig into the earlier stuff?
Probably like when I was in college, so maybe 6-7 years ago, something like that.
Cool.
I would say of the Gabriel albums, my favorite is still Selling England by the Pounds. But I would say in the whole journey of prepping for this video, checking out all the different versions, like the AP SACD and the Nick Davis 5-1 mix, and now this, I have to say I have a new appreciation for this record. I think it's good. It's kind of genius. The production of it, like good. You talked about this whole idea of going underground. There's a moment on the record, I think it's the transition from Broadway melody into Cuckoo Cocoon, where it's amazing how just the music itself, like you totally feel like you're going into some other dimension in the transition between those two songs. And I mean, the treatment of Peter Gabriel's vocals on this album, like there's parts where he's just like totally like maniacal, and there's parts where he's like whisper quiet, he's screaming at you. I mean, I think his voice is really the star of the show on this album, though not to say that, the other performances aren't great. But I think what's interesting about this record is that it is like a fantasy album, and it describes a lot of these situations that are totally incomprehensible, like songs like The Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging, where like the character is watching a sort of factory where people are being spit out. But I think I think if you asked even the different members of Genesis what the story of this album is, they give you different answers. Like I don't think there is a clear sort of story that everyone can agree on. But my suspicion as to what he's doing in this is he's trying to use these fantastical situations to explain some kind of real life feeling. So take, for example, like Grand Parade. I think the message is that like sort of sometimes people's lives get stuck in a pattern, or like
which is how he was feeling at the time.
Or a song like In the Cage, it's not like you're literally in a cage. It's like sort of people are prisoners of, they're prisoners of the situations that they're in and the decisions that they make. So I think that's really what a lot of it means. But at the end of the day, like with all great concept albums, I think the songs stand on their own. Like you could listen to this record and enjoy the melodies and lyrics without having to figure out what the story is. And, the last thing I'll say about it is that it's a perfect album for a surround mix, because there's so much going on in it, and because it's so off the wall and crazy.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, really cool record. And I've enjoyed, getting to explore it deeper these last, couple weeks.
It's interesting, but I think most people probably come to Genesis through the later period. Because I remember when I was into this record, I would talk to people and I would say Genesis, and immediately they would say, oh, Phil Collins. They weren't even really aware of the fact that Peter Gabriel was in the band. But I think in recent years, people have started to come around to that more experimental stuff. And, something about the fact that it does take a little bit more effort to appreciate. I think it ends up lasting a little bit longer. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, actually, you said something very interesting a few minutes ago, and I just want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit. You said when they were recording that there was periods of absence between Peter and Steve, and that a lot of the time it was a trio of the three guys working. Isn't it ironic that that's how the band would end up?
Yeah, and that was kind of the point I was getting to, is that I feel like that trio Genesis was sort of born here, and the sort of proof of that, if you want to say proof, is in the fact that they were still playing in the cage by the time of the Invisible Touch tour. And it's like if you get the Three Sides Live DVD, there's a great medley of In the Cage, Slippermen, and a little bit of Riding the Scree. So yeah, I do feel like that kind of backbone of Genesis was kind of born here.
If you look at my old YouTube channel, there's actually a video of when I was like 17 playing that medley on the drums. A long time ago.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add to that was you talked about that whole period at Headley Grange, and if I have the history right, I don't think they really achieved a lot during the time there as far as actual recording. Like those were just kind of writing sessions. Supposedly, like the rest of the guys without Gabriel, like the tracks for this album, like the instrumental tracks were recorded really fast. Like in 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, which is also kind of insane. Because the playing on this album it's complicated. This isn't something that just like any band could play. So yeah.
No. Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because most of what they did is they were at Headley Grange is they were recording on like a consumer grade, recorder that Phil Collins owned. And that's another beef I have with this box set is that there is well over an hour of those rehearsal tapes available on YouTube to hear. And what was happening was the guys were recording all of it. They were giving it to Gabriel. Gabriel was in a different room. He was working out the lyrics around what was being recorded. And that was another like big issue that the band had was that Gabriel staked out his claim. He's like, guys, I am going to write the lyrics on this album, the whole album. Like he really forced for that consistency. I think to the album's strength, at least as a concept album. But yeah, the main album was recorded in Wales, and I'm not sure what the name of the studio was or where exactly it was. But a big thing that they were going for with this was trying to capture their live sound. So a lot of this material, in fact, I think all of it was recorded live off the floor in the studio, and then the vocals were done later. So I don't know like how much, you'd think like that would add something in the surround context too, like, because you would be hearing, bits of other instruments kind of bleeding through. But we're going to talk about this, the surround mixes very shortly, which I guess that's a good segue. Although I'd like to talk a little bit about my own impressions of this album. This was my first Genesis record.
Oh, wow.
And
okay. One of mine too. I remember being at the record store and picking up this and Nursery Crime.
Okay.
And then I would later come back for Duke and just continue on the path.
This was my first Genesis record, and I was about 16. So at a time in my life when I'm discovering a lot of things. And so it's always had a really special place in my heart. I remember listening to it for the first time, and this is something that nobody does anymore, but I remember listening in headphones and going through the story, the lyrics in the book, and trying to follow what was going on and being so intrigued by it and frightened by it in some ways. And, kind of like creeped out, but at the same time, like finding the music so enjoyable and really falling in love with this album and going on to explore all of the earlier Peter Gabriel Genesis albums as a result of this, later the mid-70s albums, but that's a story for another day. So let's get to the point, which is the new Atmos mixes, which I have conveniently in this kind of, I don't know what you call this, wallet that's included in the box set. Cody's got the full box here.
Yeah.
Didn't you guys appreciate that it was a mini box? I feel like the record companies have learned that we're running out of space for these things and they're making them smaller.
Yeah, that's very good. It fits right next to my new Hawkwind box. It's like the same size. So I don't mind the size of the box at all. I was kind of afraid it would be LP size. But I've heard this album across many formats. I've heard the definitive edition. I've heard the vinyl, which I've got here as well. And the Analogue Productions SACD, which we'll talk about a little bit in just a second, as well as the Nick Davis mixes. And I'll go first. So my opinion or my impression of the new Atmos mix is, to sum it up in one word, disappointment. And I expected a lot more of this. And one of the reasons why it's taken a little while for me to kind of absorb this and talk about it is, for one thing, it's a double album. So we're talking about twice the material as usual. But also I was trying to figure out a way to articulate my disappointment that doesn't come across as entitlement. And that's very hard because, and I want to qualify by saying that I'm so glad that Tony Banks and Peter Gabriel worked together on this, going back, at their age and investigating this material again and seeing what they can get out of it, having some fun with it. Like, I'm really a big fan of all of that. That being said, if I could sum up my impressions of this Atmos mix in one word, it would be inconsistent. And there are problems like with the bass presence. Like that's kind of the first thing that popped out to me, especially in the title track. The bass is kind of non-existent on that, but then when you get to later songs, like say some of the ballads, the bass is almost too much. Like it's overpowering. There's kind of this issue where the drum sound is inconsistent. Some tracks it's very boomy, other tracks it's very bright, and the EQ is kind of strange to me. I don't like that the dynamics have been zapped out of it. You know, Jonathan, you referenced in your review how the fly on the windshield section, it should hit us like a brick wall. Like it's supposed to be like a Led Zeppelin type Kashmir kind of thing. And that dynamic just really isn't there on this new edition. So, and to me, it's like, it's more than it just being unfaithful. If this were an unfaithful, but creative and genius mix, I would be championing it. I would be so pleased to have it, but it almost has the feeling to me of like the King Crimson Elemental mixes, where it's kind of been picked apart and it's lost its cohesion, or as Stephen Wilson likes to use, glue. I feel like the mix has lost a lot of its glue, especially in the more dynamic parts. And we could go in nitpicking little moments here and there, parts that are missing. Like there's that little narration that's missing from the title track where he says, you know, the lights are always bright on Broadway. There's always music in the and it just dies down. I'm like, what the heck? So that's sort of my introduction to my disappointment. What do you guys think? What are your impressions of this new Atmos mix?
Well, Cody, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Cody.
I've heard some of these songs hundreds of thousands of times, and so I have a certain kind of way that I'm used to hearing them, right?
Yeah.
And so going into this Atmos mix, there's lots of stuff that I really appreciated about it, but I had also things that I had bones to pick about it as well. And one of them is the stupidest thing, but I have to say it. And I think, Jonathan, you know the reason why this got left off, but I'm still frustrated about it. So if I go back to the 1994 edition of the CD or the original vinyl, it's there. It's not there on the 07 mix, and it's not there on this new mix. In Colony of Slippermen, when they're doing the yellow plastic shooby-doo part, it's the yellow. Oh no, it's the next one where there's like that sort of grooves like there's like on the original mix, Phil hits a china there. That's what it sounds like. And on this box set, I thought, oh great, they're going to bring it back because Nick Davis removed it for whatever reason. It is still gone. It is not there, and I miss it every time I don't hear it. Do you know the part I'm talking about?
Is it in Slippermen? Is it the one hell of a fight?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
yep.
I had the lyric wrong. That's the spot. That's the spot that it's in. And I was waiting so anxiously when I went to that song, and I was like, I got to see if they reinstated that part, and they didn't. But for the most part, I do dig the mix. I found in various spots of the album, like that was just really odd choices for placement of things on this. I mean, that spot in Anyway, when Steve Hackett comes in with the big solo, when the tempo kind of picks up a bit, instead of having him take up the whole back speakers, they kind of just put him up in the center.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's a really odd choice because that's a big part. You would have expected that to kind of open up and surround, right? And, you know, have all the harmonies and everything. But that's not a complaint. It's just an observation. There's other parts on this mix where it sounds like there's signals being sent to a speaker that's not plugged in.
Yeah, I see what. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that's sort of like there's always magic in the air. That bit. It's like, is my speaker not plugged in or something? What happened to that? And you know, I would also mention like the flute in Lamia is missing. And that's something that really bothers me. And I think it's because, number one, I'm a flute player, so maybe that's why it specifically bothers me. But it does add something texturally to that track that's very unique, and to not, I mean, it's missing from the entire track, but especially at the end where he's just kind of riffing. It almost feels like to me that somebody was taking kind of the more out there parts of the album and they were trying to subdue them. And there's another moment like in Back in New York City where he says it was burned in the first place, so I'll burn it to ash. And Tony Banks hits that, like that synth dive or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, on the original mix, it's too loud, but it's the climax of the tune. It adds something, you know, it's like a tension release to the end of the tune. And on this mix, on the 2007 mix, it's there, but it's buried. On this new mix, it's almost non-existent. So that sort of thing just kind of leaves me scratching my head too.
It's strange because if you put on the stereo mix of this, I mean, like when this came out, I put it on Apple Music in my car because the car didn't have a CD player. I didn't have the box yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Tara and I were driving along, and it took over the Ford Explorer. Like that part was so there that it was like, it was there. And so then I got this, and it was like it was just nothing. It was just like, wow, that's really strange. And like, so that's kind of how different the stereo mix is, because I found the stereo mix of this, the bass is so punchy. Mike Rutherford is playing stuff that I had never really realized before on the other mixes. And then kind of like, as you say, on the Dolby Atmos mix here, it's still there, but it comes in waves, right? Like you can hear it better in some spots and less so in others. What I do appreciate about the Dolby Atmos mix is that it does take the elements of certain weird parts, like say when Brian Eno comes in with the percussion parts on various tracks. They pan those out really well. And then some of the use of panning. So like when there's that spot in the Colony of Slippermen when Gabriel does that, better find your brother John, and they have him traveling all around that is so cool.
And that
I was going to say that was the first thing that jumped out at me listening to it. There's a lot of like around the room panning.
Yes.
Which is surprising because you like a lot of mixers kind of tend to veer away from that stuff because, you know, people get accused of it being gimmicky, which is the last thing you want a surround mix to be. And like, there's a lot of it in this mix. In every song, there's something that moves around. It could be, you know,
get out.
It could be Tony's keyboard. It could be Steve's guitar, some of the vocal effects and percussion. And like, for me, like some of it is cool. Some of it is sort of silly. But like after like in Fly in a Windshield, after the wall of death hits and like Steve's guitar goes flying around the top speakers, I was like, oh, that was cool. You know? So I appreciated that they tried to really go out there and make it a fun experience.
I would agree with that.
They did do an overall good job. It was just like I'm nitpicky when it comes to Genesis, but they did do a good job with the panning and different, you know, things like that. It's just like the volumes are odd, you know, like at the beginning. It's like when it goes and the lamb lies down, the vocals come in. It's like they're almost barely audible.
So that's like another good example of where like the panning doesn't work for me. Like it goes and the lamb and one speaker and then lies down and another speaker. Like that's an example of a part that I think I like it in the back, but it should be static.
Yeah, that should be on all the speakers. That's a big part. Like,
and I feel that that's something that's underserved in general on this mix are the backing vocals. Like they're practically non-existent at times, and it's kind of the opposite of what happened on the Nick Davis mix, because on the Nick Davis mix, of course, they cranked up Phil Collins' backing vocals over Gabriel's, and so that's jarring too, because you'll hear a harmony part that's like covering like a top line or something like that, and you're thinking, what the heck's going on? Here they kind of made them almost non-existent, and that's really frustrating to me. And you know, we can talk a little bit about the beginning of this album, because that's something that annoyed me right from the start. And there I go, I'm sounding entitled. I wasn't going to do this, but the opening of the album,
you're allowed to be entitled, because who are these mixes really for? They're for people who've heard these albums tons of times. They want to hear something kind of new, but also familiar. And that's kind of the tricky balance with these surround mixes of old albums, but go ahead.
Well, to further that point, it's like, who's going to spend $120 for this album? Fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody who loves the album is going to spend that money. So no, what I was going to mention is that Tony Banks' keyboard, where he's doing that wonderful overlapping hands thing that he's kind of famous for.
The best.
It sounds like it's underwater. And like you got to nail like the opening seconds of the album. So when that comes in, it sounds like it's underwater. It's like, what the heck? Is there something wrong? And then when the band finally kicks in, which to me is like a really good way of identifying how things are EQ'd, when you hear the whole band hit like a wall there. And it feels like Rutherford's kind of back in the mix, which he's growling on that title track. He almost sounds like John Wetton. And like he's got the melody and he's pulled back, and that's just that's baffling to me. And
the cymbals are like way forward.
Oh yeah. And splashy. Yep.
Yes.
But I find on the stereo mix, on the other hand, that his bass is like so like plowing in that title track.
Well,
so that's why it's so different. Like, I don't understand.
not to interrupt, but the stereo mix that's on this box set is the original mix.
Yeah.
So that's why it sounds so good.
It's not as good a mastering of it as the AP SACD though. It's
not
also
even
pretty
close.
Compressed compared to
pretty compressed.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that too. I mean, we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but in my opinion, the stream on the Blu-ray of the original mix is a lot better than the CD master. The CD master is very loud. It's brittle sounding. What am I hearing?
I don't know. I don't hear it.
No, I'm hearing something. As soon as you said it's very loud, then it went.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Let me try something.
You got to leave that in.
It might be from me. There's someone like using like a leaf blower.
Okay. All right.
What can you do?
You can't do anything about that. So back to the point about the different masters. I did directly A/B compare the stereo master that's on the Blu-ray, and it's a lot better than the CD, but it doesn't have anything on the AP SACD. And I'm not saying that the original mix is absolutely perfect. It does have issues. One specific example, you guys brought up the Colony of Slippermen. I actually really like the Colony of Slippermen on the Atmos mix. And one of the big reasons for that is that because Gabriel's speaking in this low voice, they had to really crank up his gain in the original mix, and to the point where they kind of overdid it. It kind of covers the whole band. I like the way that the Atmos mix, and also Nick Davis's 2007 5.1 mix, pans the Slipperman voice around the room, so it's got more air to breathe. And that song specifically, I would say, well, gee, I wish they would have done the whole album more like that, but hey.
So I feel like we're kind of on the same page where we agree that the surround panning is kind of haphazard, but occasionally cool or interesting. Yeah. But I think the primary issues with this are the tonality.
Yes.
So like we talked about, the dynamics are missing in a lot of places. You mentioned Flying a Windshield. And Cody, you mentioned the guitar solo in Anyway. Like, that should be huge. And it's just like, it sort of hits it like with a whimper. But the biggest issue for me is that it's just like really bright.
Right.
Like, I find this like, it's hard to listen to the album all the way through.
It's fatiguing.
Cymbals are really bright. Gabriel's voice is like super harsh. I mean, granted, in the original mix, there's parts where it's intended to sound quite abrasive, like at the end of In the Cage. But whatever settings they used in this new mix, like, it's exacerbated. So for me, I think if it sounded like a little warmer and less bright, that would make me like it more. And I would say the same issue plagues the Nick Davis mix to a greater degree. Like, that's even brighter than this one.
Yeah.
Well, Nick Davis is a very big fan of compression. Sometimes to a fault. I don't hate his mixes because
he did Season's End, which sounds great.
Yeah, that is a fantastic sounding. It's one of my favorite Marillion albums, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when he did that original run of the Genesis 5.1s, I loved those box sets. I still do. Like the green and the blue and those and the red box sets with the DVDs in them. I love those things. I've got all of them, all including the live and everything. I love them. But I've heard people complain about his compression, and rightfully so, I suppose. Right? Yeah, he does kind of, where the dynamics, everything's at one sort of level. But yeah, there was just some really odd choices with certain things on this Atmos mix. I could find, I could hear sometimes where cuts were, and takes had, because it's so defined, and I actually kind of appreciate that at the same time.
Oh no, did we lose him?
No, Jonathan, are you still there?
I'm back. I lost you.
Oh.
He's good on my end, so I think Jonathan, it's your turn with the internet problems.
Oh, well, am I good now?
Yeah, you're good. It's the ghosts of Headley Grange.
You're gonna have fun editing this.
I just find with this that there is a certain definition to it, which I really do appreciate.
Yeah.
Because you can hear everything, and I'm listening to it and going, oh, I didn't even know that there was a flute part in this, or oh my gosh, Steve Hackett's part. There's a guitar thing that's so quiet in the back that's, finally I'm hearing very obviously now. But then there's also times where it's it's kind of cool, and I could hear this on some of the Yes albums too, when you're listening and you can hear where the tape cuts start and end. It's I could hear it fly in the windshield when he's doing the solo, and the solo going all around the room, which was amazing. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I can hear kind of where a new take starts.
Yes.
And then when they drop into Broadway Melody of 1974, it's okay, this is a new cut. It works. It doesn't sound disgruntled or disjointed or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you can kind of hear where new takes kind of begin in certain spots.
Broadway Melody is from a different performance that was edited onto the end of Fly on a Windshield. And even on the original, I hear an EQ change on that cut. It's just kind of the way that it is. But I agree, it's a little smoother in the original than it is in this version.
Yeah.
On the original, to me, it just flowed, and I was always why did they separate them as different tracks? Because on the 94 CD, I believe they're on the same track.
Same with this.
Yeah. And so I guess I didn't realize that they were I knew that they were separate songs, so to say, because Steve Hackett even cuts up the tracks on his live albums. But that's interesting to note that they are actually not from the same recording time at all, because they made them sound so flowing smooth on this. Yeah. But on this, on the Atmos mix, it's you can tell this is a different cut.
Well, to your point, when I listen to the original 70s mix of this album, it feels like it was labored over.
Yes.
There are little parts where you could tell somebody pushed a fader at just the right moment.
Yeah.
Or for example, I'm a fly on the windshield on the freeway. You could hear them riding the reverb up on that.
Yeah.
And to recreate those things perfectly all these years later, it would be hard for the best engineer.
Yeah.
But I feel in this version, I don't know if they were rushed to deliver it, or if it would have benefited just from another set of years after the facts. But a lot of it seems very haphazard. It's close, but not quite right.
And that is what frustrates me, is that they delayed this thing for 9 months, and it still came out sounding rushed. How is that even possible? They needed another pass of quality control. And I like what you guys are saying about it sounding more disjointed, because I was feeling it sounds like they mixed it as individual songs, not as an album experience. And it feels like they didn't quite listen to it enough as an album experience. And there's some other strange stuff. Are you guys getting the gap in between New York City and Hairless Heart? Did you guys notice that?
Yes. Yeah.
That was real jarring to me.
And I was well, it's been so long since I've listened to that. Maybe that's kind of how it's supposed to be. No, I always kind of remember there being a flow, a connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, I heard the fade out, the drop, and it's oh, okay.
There's another spot in one of the other songs, I think it's Chamber of 32 Doors, where his voice, like it's at the end of a phrase, like every door that I've walked through, and the voice, like they do a cool thing where it slides from the front speakers to the back, but there's like a little like break in the middle of the gap, and it like sort of kills the moment. That was another kind of thing in that vein. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost makes the vocal disappear. It's like they're pushing it to the back, but they're also putting the volume fader down at the same time. And then it like for a millisecond, just everything is like quiet, and then brings me back.
I mean, in general, for me, I thought like I think Ian and I were talking about this, off camera. Generally, the ballad type songs are the ones that work the best.
Yeah.
So like Cuckoo Cocoon, I thought is a standout. And then like the ambient type songs, like especially like The Waiting Room, I thought was incredible.
Cody's favorite Genesis song in existence.
Well, I mean, The Waiting Room was interesting because of the way things are flying around the room. And you can literally hear the thunderstorm that they were talking about. They said we were recording this in the middle of a thunderstorm. And you can actually hear, as soon as the band is about to come in, you can hear a big...
I was confused by that. Were they talking about rehearsing at Headley Grange when they were talking about that thunderstorm, or was that the actual recording sessions?
I think they might have just tried to recreate because they were talking about rehearsing in Headley Grange for that, but then they didn't record it the first time. And Tony says we tried to recreate the exact same thing, and it wasn't as good as the first time, but they managed to get some thunderstorm sounds on there somehow.
Interesting. I got to hear that again, because I didn't notice that.
But to me, like listening to The Waiting Room in this mix, like I felt like if they could have mixed it this way 50 years ago, they would have.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like this was how it was always supposed to be.
Yeah.
But then like some of the heavier songs, like Back in New York City or the title track, they just kind of like fall apart. Like there's interesting little bits, but I would rather listen to the stereo versions of those songs.
Same here. And that hurts me, because my favorite songs on this record are Back in New York City, Into Hairless Heart, and my other favorite is Anyway. And Anyway's got to be the most, for lack of a better word, neutered of all of the tracks. And it lacks the power of the original to me.
Another standout from this in a good way is I like those transitional tracks, like those tracks that you don't think of when you think of the album. Like when you think of this record, you automatically think of The Lamb, the song, In the Cage, Anyway, The Lamia, those sort of things. But it really gave me an appreciation for stuff like Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats.
Agree.
And they did a really good job mixing those with the beautiful 12-string acoustics kind of flowing around. And it's like, this is just musically orgasmic. It is just absolutely wonderful. They did a beautiful job on you see all the stuff that I'm saying. I think Ian came on expecting me to praise this thing, but I'm just making observations. I'm not complaining by any stretch. I'm just making observations as a fan who's been a fan of the band for a long time. And it's like, I'm still happy with it, even though there's things that I wouldn't have done if I was the one mixing it. I would have definitely changed a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about, but I'm not the one mixing it. So,
well, but even like I was just gonna say, even like Hairless Heart, I thought was pretty nice in this mix, even though, as you said, the dynamics are a little bit squashed relative to the original. But the spread of like having Steve's guitar, the acoustic in front of you and electric behind you. Yeah. And then you get sort of Tony's keyboards coming from the sides and there's a part where the drums like suddenly walk around the room.
That's neat.
I thought the first time I heard it, I was like, ooh, that's cool. Like, I don't know. Like they just wanted to do something at that moment.
Yeah.
It kind of like it almost felt like a 70s quad mix, like at times, like with the weird panning. Like they wanted to like really show like we have all these speakers, like we can do stuff. And like I said before, like sometimes it's organic and it feels like it's an extension of things that happened in the original. Because there are a fair number of moments in the original mix where things move across the stereo spectrum. And there are other parts where it just sort of feels gimmicky. Yeah. So
another standout for me of the shorter tracks was Steve Hackett's Here Comes the Supernatural Anesthetist.
The guitar jumping from speaker to speaker. That was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course I love that big ending at the end of that, all that great stuff he's doing, and just the fact that Steve kind of takes over, and that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about the second disc of this album, even before, way before the Atmos mix and all this. I would sit and listen to this album at nighttime in my room and just appreciate how the second disc is so much Steve Hackett going on there. But then there's times on this mix where it's like there's certain songs, like if you take In the Cage, and I'm just being nitpicky, all of you guys who worked for remixing and remastering this, I'm not complaining, I promise. But there's times where I think that on the first disc they should have made Steve Hackett more prevalent in the mix.
On the original, you mean, or the Atmos mix?
No, I think overall on many of the albums probably, but
yeah. I get what you mean. No, that was a serious bone of contention for Steve himself, as he couldn't get his material on the albums.
And it worked. Like he did get quite a few bits, in fairness, like Cuckoo, and he got a lot of stuff on this. There's a lot of Steve in various parts of this record, but in parts where you would think that he would be more punchy in the mix, they've almost shut him right off.
Mm-hmm.
Like In the Cage, ba-dow, 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 ba-dow. When it comes into that part, you can hear Steve perfectly in the left channel. You can hear him perfectly. And then an organ comes in and Steve is almost gone.
That's literally what Hackett said, is that he was competing with Tony Banks for frequencies during the making of this album. And, these guys, when they mixed the original album, they labored over it quite a bit. And you had, Peter and Phil working the night shift, mixing the album, and Tony and Mike and Steve coming in the next day and kind of undoing their work and saying, no, that sounds like crap. We're going to do it our way. So, I do feel like the original album was maybe presided over by all members of the band, whereas this, you have Steve you have Peter and Tony making all the decisions. And I don't know if that's partially to blame. I do love the idea of these guys getting together and saying, hey, what's in the toy box? What can we do? What can we do that's fun? But yeah, something that was just a little bit like Jonathan said, tonality speaking closer to the original, I think I would have been much more accepting of, because, I got to be honest, I really just don't care for this mix that much. I mean, there's fun stuff in it. But my overall feeling is, well, gee, that could have been so much better. And I hate to admit that.
You know what? I mean, as cool and like as much as I do enjoy it myself, I'm just making observations, right? I do enjoy the mix, but I have to echo what you're saying in the sense that I think if they had got someone who's meticulous, and not to say that the guy who did it sucks, like this is a cool
of course
mix.
Not.
But if we had got the guy that's on both of our t-shirts, it would have been a totally different experience.
Yes. However, he still would have had to listen to what Tony and Peter wanted. And that quite possibly may have driven Steven Wilson crazy, because Steven is known for voicing his opinion when appropriate. Take for example, on a Passion Play. He's mixing a Passion Play in 2014. Ian Anderson says, delete all the sax parts. And Wilson says, I don't think that's a good idea. Would they have listened to him? I don't know.
Going back to your point about Steve Hackett, I think I heard more of him in this mix than I heard in the Nick Davis 5.1 mix.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I would say the only moment where I really thought like, wow, that was buried was the guitar solo in Anyway, which we talked about. But one of the things that's kind of nice about that is since it's isolated the center, you could just go turn the center channel up if you wanted to.
Your own mix.
Yeah.
Well, when that came on, I thought that was going to be powerful, like taking up all the back speakers.
I would have put it in the top speakers. Thought that would be cool. Yeah.
It's interesting, but I mentioned before, but I'm running a 5.1.2 system, so I don't have any height speakers. But listening to this mix, the effect is almost like the whole mix is hanging in the air for me. And I'm not quite sure how that was pulled off in my system, but it does kind of feel like it's above me. Whereas, like a lot of other 5.1 and Atmos mixes sound more upfront or more, more oriented to the floor, I guess is what I should say.
The
You
thing with
have
that,
firing speakers.
I do have up-firing speakers, yes.
Okay.
I was going to say the thing with Atmos is like I guess the kind of two ways you could mix. And I mean, obviously there's more than two, but kind of two styles that we see are people treat the sort of top and bottom like they're different places.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the Steven Wilson mixes are like that, where like he'll have the backing vocals suddenly come out of the tops, or a keyboard or guitar part, but they're kind of treated as different places. And then there are other kinds of mixes like this one where there's elements placed between the top and bottom.
Right.
And I feel like I noticed more of that approach in this. Like there are not a ton of moments where like there was like a loud isolated part that came out of the top speakers. But like we talked about in Fly in a Windshield, like Steve's guitar is moving around. It's definitely using the height and lower level. The flute in Cuckoo Cocoon is also moving around in that sort of area between the top and bottom. There was one song, I think it was Counting Out Time, where there's like a loud, like, there's that fuzz guitar that ends each verse.
Mm-hmm.
Found a girl I wanted to date. Da, 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 da.
Oh yeah,
that part is in one of the height speakers, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
The little like what do you call it, like the like sort of trombone solo or brass solo in Counting Out Time is also at the tops. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so can I take a minute to talk about that solo? I interviewed Steve about 2-3 years ago. I actually got to interview him, and I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "That is a really cheap guitar synth that was supplied to us by the record company. They were really badly made, but they were called the Synthy Hi-Fly." And so he just plugs his guitar into that, makes some noises with it, and that's what that solo is in the middle of that, is actually a Synthy Hi-Fly. And Pink Floyd used a similar machine on Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, because I wondered for years what the heck that was. And so when the opportunity came about to ask him in an interview setting, I was like, I have to ask him this.
I bet no one ever asked him about that.
Probably not, because you're right. It does sound like it sounds like it could be a keyboard. It sounds like it could be brass. It sounds like it could be like, I don't know what.
I thought it was brass, like intentionally played in like a cheesy way. That was my impression of it.
That's actually a guitar.
So, what do you guys feel like this versus the Nick Davis mix? Taking the original mix out of it, what are you reaching for?
Well, first of all, like there's no reason why they couldn't have put the Nick Davis mix on this Blu-ray. So that I'll just voice that complaint immediately, so that we wouldn't have had to say like, well, you have to buy one version or the other. I still think this mix is better than the Nick Davis one. It's not as harsh. It's more interesting as a surround experience.
Yes.
But like, I think I would take the AP SACD over either of them.
I agree with that.
I think if I have to pick, as much as I love Dolby Atmos, and I just love those types of albums that can get worked into something so cool like that, I'm going to actually go for the stereo remaster that's on the CDs, because it's so punchy. It really is. It's so punchy. The bass is so definitive, and it has that definition that the Atmos mix has, but it doesn't lose anything.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, for all intents and purposes, it's closer to the AP CD.
Yes.
Because it's the original mix, although in my opinion, it's much louder. I agree with what Jonathan said. The AP SACD is my choice, hands down.
I haven't got that one yet.
Yeah, you should get it. But it's expensive, but it's worth it. And it's cheaper than the box set. So,
Is it a double CD or is it just one single disc and all the info on?
It's a double CD. The only thing that bothers me is that AP insisted on stacking the discs in the case. So I had to get a second. It's over there, but I just got a 2 CD, like a blank CD case, and stuck them in there, and they sit next to each other on the shelf. But that's my only gripe with the AP CD is I didn't care for the stacking of the discs. But between the two multi-channel mixes, the Nick Davis versus the Bob Mackenzie Atmos mix, the Slippermen have descended upon us. Um, um, between the Atmos mix and the Nick Davis mix, gee, it's like pick your poison for me. I agree with Jonathan that the Atmos mix is way more adventurous.
Yeah.
But as a fan of the original album, I feel like I can tell Nick Davis has heard the original album. So I kind of prefer the Nick Davis mix just because it's got those elements that I'm used to hearing. And yeah, it's got issues. It's compressed very badly.
I mean, the other thing I like about the Nick Davis mix is that it has Gabriel's voice in the center channel.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like Steven Wilson or Bob Clearmountain would do. So, I mean, I like the sort of precision of having it there. And also as the end user, you can sort of turn it up and down as you want. I know that's not what the mixers intend, but it's just a sort of a useful feature of doing that. In the new mix, like I know we kind of touched on this, the use of the center channel is quite interesting in the Atmos mix. Gabriel's vocals are never in the center, except for when he's doing like a narration kind of thing. You know, like in the Broadway melody, the Ku Klux Klan serves hot soul food. That goes in the center channel. A couple of the guitar solos are in it, but most of the time it's kind of just empty.
Yeah,
or it has like a little bit of the drums or something. So I'm not saying you have to put the vocal in the center channel all the time. Like it doesn't always work, and not every mixer does that. But I would have found some more interesting way to use it than that.
Yeah. I noticed that too.
You know, I'm all for audacious mixes and trying new things, but I don't know. This kind of sounds like it's maybe an early Atmos mix, if you know what I'm saying. Like, I didn't hear a lot of the early Atmos mixes, so Jonathan, you would be much more, you know, knowledgeable about that. But it almost kind of sounds like we're figuring this technology out. And at this point in time, when we've had 10 years of Atmos mixes to sort through or something like that, it just
for
seems
music,
odd.
I would say it's been about 5 years. Like
More
in
like 5 years.
2020, the first like Atmos mixes were done. I mean, one thing I would mention, like perhaps in defense of the Atmos mix, is if you go on Instagram, Bob Mackenzie, the guy who mixed it at Real World, you know, overseen by Tony and Peter, as we mentioned, he did like a lengthy Instagram post sort of talking about the process. Really? And he mentioned that one of the directives for the mix was to do it like in surround from the start.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we often talk about Steven Wilson, like he has this process where he recreates the stereo mix and matches it. And then later he sort of moves all the parts out into surround. But in this case, I think the idea was to make it like a totally different thing, mixing in surround from the start, which might explain why there are so many differences. I don't think it explains why there's like parts outright missing.
Yeah.
I mean, to give them the benefit of the doubt, it's possible that there were things that were like flown in on the stereo mix.
Sure.
Sometimes that would happen on vintage records where they'd add a part as it was being mixed to stereo. So it's not on the multi-track. But like some of the things you mentioned, like, you know, cymbal crashes missing, flute part missing, like I would chalk that up probably more to just error than anything
artistic choice. Peter, I don't feel so good about that flute part. Yeah.
But I do think there was an intention to make it different from the stereo mix, which, you know, depending on how big a fan you are of the album, some people might appreciate that, some people may not.
I got a question for you guys. If you just talking about the stereo mixes in general, which do you prefer? The 94 CD stereo mix, the 2007 stereo mix, or the stereo mix that's on the CD box here?
Well, the 94 definitive mix has its problems too. It's heavily noise reduced, which all of those 94 mixes are.
Yeah.
And it's very brittle sounding, but that is the version of the album that I grew up on and I first heard. I can't comment on the Nick Davis stereo mix. I know that the Nick Davis stereo mix is different from the 5.1 mix. I can't comment on that. I would say automatically I would prefer the 94 definitive edition to the version that's on the CD of this box set. However, the version that's on the Blu-ray is okay. It's not as loud. It's obviously the same master, but it's not presented nearly as loud.
Well, I was going to say, I would have assumed that the Nick Davis, the stereo mix was either done first and then expanded to 5.1, or it's some kind of like fold down of the 5.1. because I mean, I sort of checked out some of it just to see what it was like, and
Mhm.
it's got like all the same problems as the 5.1. You know, like it's really bright, the vocals are really loud. So, I mean, it's interesting how we talk about all these different eras of reissues, and like each of them have their own kind of problem. Like in the early 90s, they like using a lot of noise reduction on stuff. Then in the 2000s, they like compressing everything and making it really bright. So I
Loudness
think
wars.
the AP version feels like the most sympathetic representation of the mix that they made in the 70s.
Go buy the AP version.
I gotta hear that. I gotta hear that. I gotta hear it live tonight.
Well,
yes. For the viewers at home, Steve Hackett is playing in Toronto tonight at the time of recording this. So I'm going to see him play a good chunk of this album, not the full thing because who's got the time, but but he's playing like I mean, there's a couple of cuts. I've been looking at his set list, and there's a couple of cuts. It's like I wonder why he's not playing that, but he's playing a lot of the heavy hitters. So
yeah, back in New York City is the big one for me. Like that's my favorite tune on the album. I mean, the reason why I like it is that it's so unique.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're known for being very pastoral at this point, with albums like Selling England by the Pound, and just to have something so aggressive where Peter is shouting is so different for them, and it's so exciting. But kind of the impression I get is that several members of Genesis might think that The Lamb should be a single album, but the problem is that none of them can agree on which tracks would be on it.
Well, this is always the thing with double albums. Like I agree with you. Like I think it's a long record, and I start to get tired around like side 3, like whichever the side that has with Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats. Like I start to sort of check out at that point.
Yeah.
But like if you were to ask me like which songs would you cut, it would be like I don't know.
Yeah.
like what's a good example? Like I don't know. Like Hairless Heart is like an instrumental you could easily cut, but I think that's a great track, and I
love it.
I think
it's
2
minutes.
So I've actually been appreciating that more recently than ever, and I'm happy that it's in his set list tonight.
Well, let me ask you guys a question. What Genesis album would you next want in Atmos? Provided that the mix will be good.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like I don't know if I'll buy another one. I probably will. But yeah, that maybe Selling England by the Pound. I think A Trick of the Tail would be cool. It's kind of like a follow-up to this because, you know, you have the 4-man Genesis moving forward to that one.
I think that's what we'll get because the 50th anniversary of that is in February.
Right.
So,
I also think the 5.1 mix of Trick of the Tail is horrendous. Like it's like really bright. Like if you like cymbals as the main instrument in that album, it's the mix for you. So I think of all the ones from the last round of reissues, that would maybe be my first pick for one that needs to be redone.
Yeah.
That's the compression. That's the compression coming at you.
Yeah.
Pushing the cymbals really out there in the mix and cutting your head off, right?
Mm.
And then number 3 is also notable for that compression as well.
It's very thin sounding. Yeah, I love that album, but it's very thin.
I love that album too. I listen to it quite regularly. This one is an amazing album, but it's very long, like you were saying. It's very long, and so like it's kind of one of those where you don't come back to it for a while, but when you do, it's also very rewarding. So it's like,
But I have to say, I've heard The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway in its complete form, various different versions, maybe 5 times in the past 2 weeks, and I'm not sick of it. I absolutely love that album, and it's my favorite Genesis album.
It's up there for me. It's a tremendous album. I mean, I don't want Genesis without this album in the catalog.
I guess the outstanding question that people would want answered watching this video is, do we recommend this reissue?
I don't. I mean, you guys go ahead. Would you guys recommend it? But I'll save my comments for last.
I think the Atmos mix is worth hearing if you like the record, and that could mean just streaming it. It doesn't mean you have to buy the $100 box set. The Atmos mix is on Apple Music. You can listen to it there. So I would say if you like surround sound or Atmos and you like Genesis, I would listen to the Atmos mix because there are parts of it that are pretty cool.
Yeah. To continue that thought, it's like kind of like going back to what I said earlier in the chat, it's sort of like listening to the Elemental mixes that King Crimson does now. It picks apart the album in a way that you can hear how it was put together, but I don't feel like it's in any way definitive. Okay, Cody, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I see what both of you are saying. I think I have to echo what Jonathan says a little bit. And maybe I haven't got the vinyl box set, but I know that there's a lot of people, especially who come to my channel, who appreciate the vinyl, right? Obviously,
Okay.
it's in the name of the channel, Brockway's Vinyl Bites, right? I'm a big vinyl enthusiast as well. And so I've heard really good things about the vinyl pressings of this box set, which also comes with the Atmos DVD. I haven't picked it up yet myself. I just went straight for the disc. But I would recommend it, especially if you're a vinyl lover, because of the things I've heard about the vinyl and the fact that the vinyl box set comes with the Atmos DVD as well, just like the CD one does. So I think that could be worth your while to own in your collection, because then you've got this supposedly great cut of LP and you've got the Atmos mix on the DVD. And if the vinyl sounds anything like the stereo mix sounds even streaming, I think it'll be a good purchase.
If there was a standalone Blu-ray or like a cheaper CD Blu-ray set, I would be more quick to recommend it. But the fact that it's in this expensive box set when there's a lot of other reissues out competing for people's attention, I would say maybe like stream it first to make sure that you like it before you pull the trigger on the box set.
I want to say there's a new Steven Wilson mix of a Phil Collins solo album. I'm totally going ahead in time. Some people who like this might not like that album. I love that album. That album is No Jacket Required, and the Atmos mix on that is pretty incredible. He does a really good job on that. I got no complaints. I mean, there's a bit less reverb, but that is to be expected with some of these Atmos mixes.
Not the worst thing.
Not the worst thing.
I would like to give that a listen. I mean, some people have warned me. It's like, it's not your Genesis. And I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to hear what Steven did with it. And it's cheap. It's like $20 or something like that. So
exactly.
I very much hesitate to recommend this new mix. I agree with Jonathan. I say stream it if possible. But decide if you like it first. I mean, I personally, I don't know if I'd recommend it. I would recommend this version, the Analogue Productions SACD version. And the thing is that you don't need an SACD player to play it, although some Blu-rays will read the SACD layer. So if you've got a Blu-ray player, check it out. You might be able to read it.
This guy right here.
Yeah. But, if you love the album and you want to hear it faithfully recreated digitally in a way that's very similar to the original vinyl pressings, I would recommend that. Because this Atmos mix, it kind of has some of the problems that whenever I hear people griping about Atmos, it's kind of like a good example of a lot of those problems. So it's tough for me to recommend. And in listening to it, I even found myself at one point going, am I really all that into Atmos anymore? And then I put on like a Steven Wilson something, or like the Stephen W. Taylor, Peter Hamill mixes. And I was like, oh yeah, I like multi-channel mixes.
You had me worried for a minute there.
Yeah. I mean, I was worried too. I was like kind of getting depressed about it. I was like, gee, I'm not so sure I'm into this anymore. And then I put on like a really good mix, and I am. So I'm not saying that there aren't aspects of this mix that are good, and perhaps in time it'll grow on me. Maybe I'll start to see it as its own separate thing. But at the moment, I'm very, very hesitant to recommend it.
But in the case of this Genesis record, I'm curious what people in the comments have to say about it, because it seems like from everywhere I've read on various forums and places that it is getting mixed reviews.
Yeah,
like us saying that we're not totally pleased with it doesn't seem to be like we're the odd people out in having that opinion. So
it's not controversial, I don't think. And there's a lot of people who seem to be like, well, I paid $100 for it, so it must be good. And then there's others.
I wish that were true.
Yeah, I wish that were the case. If you have anything to say about this Atmos mix, please let us know in the comments below. If you love it and we're missing something, let me know. Like I would love to hear your impressions. Perhaps in a couple of years, whatever, I'll find out I'm wrong. But to follow up on what you said, Cody, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun.
Anytime.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure. And for those of you who are watching, don't forget, because sometimes I forget to say this, but if you're not, you should subscribe to Brockway's Vinyl Bites on YouTube, and you should subscribe to Immersive Audio Album on YouTube as well. And in the description below, provided I'm not a pixelated mess speaking right now, you can actually read Jonathan's written review on this Atmos mix. Don't forget, in addition to commenting, you can also like the video and support its growth in the algorithm. And most importantly, you can subscribe to the channel. Jonathan and I have done a quadraphonic conversation, so that's going to be coming out soon. And I'd like to talk about drums and wires, XTC, so lots of good stuff. So make sure you subscribe. It's the only way to make sure that you won't miss it. But until then, that's it for today, and you'll hear from me real soon. All right, bye-bye. Thanks, guys. It's lots of fun.
Thank
Come
you,
back
boss.
anytime.
Bye.